All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Megan Crum. I am one of the facilitator managers here with the IACAC sessions today. I am joined by a lovely panel of people today that are going to be giving a great presentation. I do have a couple things for our attendees today that I am going to share my screen on, just so that you're all aware as well of some things. And so what's going to happen is, I'm going to present actually real quick. And so what's going to happen is you should be seeing my screen. And so this is how do you ask questions? You use the Q&A button at the bottom, right? Because we are in a Zoom webinar and not a Zoom meeting. And so you can type your questions and the presenters that are here will be able to see them, right? You're, as an attendee, your camera and microphone are off. So the way to ask your question is definitely in that Q&A box. You can absolutely sign up for more sessions, either whether you're a counselor or a student or a partner that works with the high schools or middle schools. It is recording, so this recording will be available to all of you at a later date. On that note, I am going to pass this back off to our group of panel today. And if you have any other questions, please put them in the chat.
Lovely. So welcome. Hi, my name is Gretchen Stouter, and I am a counselor at New Trier High School, along with Diane Wojcik is also one of our counselors. And we are part of the Choices Consortium, which is a group of Northern Illinois high schools that have an event in October, and there'll be a little bit more information about that at the end of the program, that is designed for students who are seeking accommodations at the college level. And in years past, we've had a fair, but we've also have a wonderful resource and a website that's available for you. But today we are really excited to be part because we have some people here who are in the field, who not only are in the field on the college side, but they care deeply about their roles and they care deeply about the experiences that you have. So I'm going to introduce Daniel Linden from the SALT Center at the University of Arizona, which stands for the Strategic Alternative Learning Techniques Center. And he comes as the Director of Student Support Services for the SALT Center. Also, Sarah Sampe, am I pronouncing that correctly? Okay, she is the Assistant Director for Admissions and Recruitment at the SALT Center as well. And she's been at the SALT Center for almost 12 years, serving students with learning and attention challenges. Michael Southern is the Director of Accessibility Resources at the University of Cincinnati. And he has held this title since January of 2011, but he's been at the university since May of 2001. And then Erica Loveland, welcome. She is from Landmark College in Putney, Vermont. And we're just going to pose some questions to them and then also give you the opportunity, if you have questions, to pose to them as well. So thank you all for being here. Means a lot. So the first question I think I just want to start with is, and maybe Daniel, if you could start, we'll just kind of go around. Is there a separate admissions process for students who are seeking accommodations for the SALT Center?
Well, first of all, let me say thank you for having us here in this wonderful program. To answer your question, at the SALT Center, there is a separate application and admission process. The way we operate is that the student must first apply to the University of Arizona, and then they can immediately afterwards apply to our organization here at SALT. The only caveat to that is because we have our own review process, we can't begin our review process until the University of Arizona has admitted that student. So long and short, yes, yes.
Okay, Michael, what would you, or Sarah, would you add anything to that? Okay, Michael, what would you say about that for the University of Cincinnati? Is there a separate admission process?
There is a separate admission process, and I apologize for my video. I'm going to work on the lighting, but there is a separate admission process for students. for our services for entry into the university. That is a standard process that all students follow. And then upon admission to the university, we provide an opportunity for students whom have received accommodations in the secondary settings to apply with our office. And so we try our best to get those incoming freshmen and their transfer students informed of the services so they can have an opportunity to continue those services in the post-secondary setting. So there is an admission or an application, excuse me, for our services. It's a free service. It doesn't cost anything. But for our program, it's a way for us to identify specific students so that we can pinpoint what their needs are going to be at the University of Cincinnati.
Okay. And you expect students to contact you directly about that, correct? And reach out to you.
That is correct, absolutely. With our process, students fill out our online application for services, and then my team, we will reach out to those students and have individual conversations with them to determine impact of disability, how their disabilities are manifesting, and then from there, determine what accommodations will be useful to help support those students at the university. And now that we're working remotely, our online application for services and connecting with students is a really important aspect for us to engage students in a new way of application, but also a way of learning that they're also utilizing in their classes. So some students are still getting used to it, but for the most part, they enjoy the ability to at least engage virtually with my team.
Okay, lovely, thank you. Erica, for you, how would you describe your process in terms of, is there a separate admission process?
For Landmark, there is no separate admissions process. Landmark is exclusively for students who learn differently, which includes students with learning differences such as dyslexia, ADHD, or individuals on the autism spectrum. So there is no other application.
Okay.
Thank you.
And how many students what's the student body at?
Yes, so we have about 450 students at Landmark.
Okay, lovely, thank you. So this question is for, I'll turn it over to Daniel or Sarah. What is the range of accommodations that you offer at the SALT Center?
Well, the SALT Center is a little bit different in that we do offer services, not necessarily accommodations. So we have a separate resource on campus called the Disability Resource Center, and they provide the accommodations that students might be receiving right now. With the SALT Center, we are an additional service, and so we provide academic support for students with learning and attention challenges. We provide student support specialists, which students are able to meet with 30 minutes a week to help with anything they need. We offer tutoring as well as educational technology resources. And we do also offer some psychological services. So students with in our program have that.
Okay, so at University of Arizona, if I'm a student in the audience and I'm going, I first apply to Arizona, and then I can look and see if SALT might be a good fit for me, but I also have the Disability Services Office at Arizona, correct?
Yes, yes.
Okay, lovely. Daniel, would you add anything to that?
That was amazing, and you nailed it. So,
Lovely. Michael, what is the range of accommodations that are available for students?
Absolutely. Gretchen, I love this question. In my experience, being in post-secondary for a while, I'll just put it that way, the way that students engage disability services offices now is very, very different than when I came many years ago. We really lived on what documentation said. It was the quote unquote undisputed, if the doctor or diagnostician, if he or she said it and put it in print, that was what we all used. But now, due to the reauthorization of the ADA and having a greater understanding of how our students engage post-secondary, we've still, hung on to some of those things. We definitely use the documentation as one mode of determining appropriate services and accommodations, but really it's the engagement, it's the interactive process with students. And then as professionals, we're given some latitude to determine, based on what we're reading in the documentation, what we're hearing from the students, to truly use the student's narrative just as important and as viable as what we may read from a diagnostician. And so from that conversation, we are able to determine a wide range of accommodations that a student may have. Now, there are some things obviously that we won't do. You know, we're not going to give you access to a puppy or, you know, unlimited lattes during testing as an accommodation. But if it's within reason, we will definitely engage the student in that process to determine what would be an appropriate, reasonable accommodation for that student. So the list of accommodations is as long as your arm, if you will, but it really is based on the student interactive process and engagement with a professional staff member to determine what that accommodation looks like that would help lessen the impact of the disability within the academic setting.
Could you give a couple examples so that the people in the audience would know, like, it sounds like you're holistic in terms of how you're helping that student along the way, but what are some types of accommodations that students could expect to see?
Absolutely, absolutely, Gretchen. Some of the most common are, of course, extended time in our testing center, whether that's double time, time and a half, the use of a note taker in class, and we have an opportunity now for students can engage a note taker with use of some technology that we have called Sonocent. With some of our students who are deaf, we have the opportunity for CART services, sign language interpreters in the classroom. We have an opportunity for students to receive in our residential communities. We engage with our housing and residence education partners providing housing accommodations for students. So at the University of Cincinnati, you know, my office, we receive the entire list of what a student may need to have an inclusive, equitable experience during their stay here at the University of Cincinnati. And so not only do we provide accommodations in the academic setting, but also housing. We also partner with our friends in parking services, really looking at the manifestation and what the student may need. So testing accommodations, again, may be the use of a reader or a scribe, things along those lines. And then if a student is living in the residential communities, determining what they may need in the residential communities to have that full collegiate experience. Even though we are working remotely and there are students still in class, we have students living in the residence halls, and we worked all summer to get those students ready and prepared for our residential living and determine accommodations for those students in our residential environment. And that may be assistance animals, service animals, working with the students to ensure that once they move into the residential community, they have whatever they need relative to accommodations to have a full, inclusive Bearcat experience.
Okay, lovely. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Erica, do you want to talk a little bit about just some of the services that you provide at Landmark?
Yeah, so Landmark accommodations are built into our program, the whole program. So you can easily, you don't have to go somewhere separate to ask for accommodations. You can just talk to your professor if you need extra time, if you want to take a test outside of the classroom. We have specific places you can work quietly. We are very accommodating with extended time on assignments also. So say you have a writing assignment and you are just very overwhelmed with it, and it's the night before, and you could email your professor that night before and talk about your feelings about being overwhelmed, and they understand, and it's a really welcoming community to any accommodations you're willing to have. So,
Okay,
yeah.
lovely, thank you. And I forgot to say in the beginning that Erica is from Illinois. She's from Spring Valley, Illinois. So lovely. Okay. So I think if you can get a sense in the audience, we have three different kinds of schools. We have University of Arizona, which is a large public, but then the SALT Center is an additional supportive program. Have University of Cincinnati, also a larger university public, but it has a disability services office, which is called the Accessibility Resource Office. And then you're hearing from Erica, who's talking about Landmark and it being a school that's specifically for students with ADHD and for students who are on the spectrum, right? Okay.
Yes, and dyslexia and all those other learning challenges.
Yes, thank you.
Yep.
So there's a wide variety here and you're getting a lot of different perspectives, but one of the things that I think I did want to ask is for each of your programs, and Michael, you hinted on this a little bit, but Daniel and Sarah, if you could speak to this, because Daniel, you had started off with that there's a separate application for SALT. And so is there documentation that's required? And I'm going to pose that question to each of you, and Sarah, feel free to jump in too.
Yeah, and so we come across this question quite a bit. We, to the degree that we possibly can, require the most recent, up-to-date, accurate documentation a student may have, which points and paints the picture to their specific learning challenges. So now for us, you know, as you can imagine, not every kid comes from a school that utilizes an IEP. We have kids from private schools who have done away with the IEP, so they have just an academic plan. So we'll take anything from a standardized annual IEP to a 504, the most recent psycho ed, a doctor's note, and even in those situations where we can't get any of that information, we'll reach out to educational professionals just for their recommendation. So we would love to have the most recent documentation possible, but there are layers that we can accept on top of that.
Okay. Sarah, would you add anything to that? No, that's good. Michael, how about for you? You had mentioned it's changed a lot in your time, but what would you add?
Absolutely. At the University of Cincinnati, we still use documentation as one of the points to help determine the impact of disability. But we really look to the student to help us understand what that means for he or she. The diagnostician, he or she, is looking at it from one vantage point, and the student views it from a very different vantage point. And so, as Daniel was saying, we still accept IEPs, 504s, ETRs, just
What's an ATR?
an evaluation treatment report. So sorry about that. We live in alphabet soup.
That's okay.
You threw me off there for a second.
Sorry.
But in post-secondary, we look for anything that we can gather that would allow us an opportunity to get an understanding of the student. And that could come from, I've received notes from football coaches and tutors and just a wide range of individuals. However, the strongest person in this conversation is the student. He or she understands how their disability impacts he or she greater than anyone that may sign their name to a document. And so we definitely give the student voice to that. And that's also something very different, that I want to pinpoint, when students transition from, secondary to post-secondary, the conversation and the student is really in the driver's seat of what accommodations he or she is going to need. And so that's why we really want to engage the student in that interactive process, understanding what their needs are, and then definitely use the documentation as a guide for us, but really deferring to the student, understanding what that need may look like. And then if that need sounds reasonable, we will work with the student and try to provide that accommodation.
Okay.
Can I just piggyback on what Michael said, because he said something very profound when he talks about student being in the driver's seat. And Sarah, please jump in if you want to. But in spite of all the documentation, we understand that the paper doesn't always tell the story about who the student is. And so many times we don't make our determination until we've had a chance to speak with the student. And it's at that moment where we have a strong evaluation piece to how self-aware the student is. And in spite of glowing recommendations, glowing documentation, if that student comes to us in that interview and is not very self-aware or hasn't done their research on their own learning process, that's a huge red flag. So if I can just say, hey, take this away from this panel, students, know your IEP, know your documentation, know yourself. That way you can articulate your needs like Michael was alluding to during those conversations.
Thank you. Thank you. Erica, what would you add to that?
Well, we require, I'll go over all the documents we need. We'll take your psych evaluation and pull out your cognitive and achievement scores. And then within that, you can also find your official diagnosis, which we would also need. You can also get that from a doctor. And then that's just a little bit of it that we need. But we also are looking for a couple 2 to 3 recommendations, a personal statement, and then we'll interview you at the end. And that's what we really bring together to see who you are, and you can't always find everything in a psych evaluation, and that's really important. So,
And Gretchen, can I add one piece to that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I want to kind of piggyback on what Erica was talking about the student report. I think one of the pieces that's consistent that we all do with our students is we want to hear from the students. I mean, they are truly the strongest documentation that we'll ever have, you know, because they have lived with their disabilities. They understand how it manifests. And so when they come to the post-secondary table and they're meeting with a professional, I know it's kind of hard sometimes for the student to be in the driver's seat, and it's kind of hard for the parents to step back and put, you know, and just enjoy the ride when the student is actually driving, so to speak. But that's part of learning. That's part of growth. And that's what we want to do for the students when they transition, regardless of where the student lands post-secondary wise, whatever college, we want the student to grow. And so when we're in these meetings, having these conversations, it'll allow the students to kind of step out of their comfort zone and help explain in a little bit more detail, you know, how their disability impacts them. You know, parents, grandparents, loved ones will be there, of course, because they've always been, you know, in the room, been in those transition meetings and in those 504 meetings and whatnot. But now we definitely want to give that opportunity for the student to take the reins and help us understand how to advocate for themselves and explain what their needs are. Because sooner or later we want, you know, moms and dads and grandparents, those that have always been there, to step back and watch the child learn and grow. And we'll be there to help navigate. And if they take a wrong turn, they go left when they should have gone right, that's okay. And we'll help them navigate what that looks like. And again, when they make those wrong turns, we want to help them understand why, and that's where growth comes from. And so for all of us, having that student interaction and that ability to hear from the student is paramount for us and for the student.
So I guess I want to leave like 10 minutes for questions, and we're already at like 5 o'clock. But I think my question to each of you would be that when you're talking about a student being aware and a student having an understanding of why they need accommodations, could each of you in just a little bit talk about what you expect to see? What does that look like when a student writes about themselves or in an interview? What are you listening for? So because I think, Daniel, you bring up a good point, that sense of awareness, but what does that translate to mean? If each of you could kind of think about that, and then we'll open it up for questions.
I can go for the SALT Center. We really listen to how the student describes what their learning challenge is and what they need in order to support their learning. So if, you know, a student kind of waits for a parent to insert, that tells us something. But if they are able to say what their diagnosis is and then explain what that means and also how it might present, that is perfection in our world.
Okay. Okay, Daniel, would you add anything to that?
No, I think Sarah nailed it. If a student can articulate to us how their challenges have manifested, and more importantly, that they understand how SALT can be beneficial to them, because that tells us a number of things, that they've done their research, that they understand how they learn best, and they understand how to advocate for themselves with their specialists for even when they have needs.
Okay, thank you. Michael.
With our application for services, students have to fill out a narrative. We have several questions that talk about their challenges and what they're requesting from our office. And that really gives us a chance to kind of understand and craft some questions during the student intake and our registration process. But as my colleagues were saying there, just really hearing from the student what their needs are. And for us, you know, and I would venture to say with my colleagues here, is hearing what your challenges are, fears you may have. And we recognize that, you know, your engagement with accessibility resources at the University of Cincinnati, that's just one sliver of your university experience. We want to share with you what other resources are available on campus. So your student narrative really gives us an opportunity to share that if you've had tutoring, you know, we don't offer tutoring directly within my office, but the University of Cincinnati offers tutoring. So we want to hear those little nuggets so that we can share. Go to our learning commons. If you're looking for fraternity and sorority life or getting involved with student campus activities, that engagement with the student is so important, again, to have that full collegiate experience. So we want to hear all of those things during our intake.
Okay. Erica, what would you add?
As an alumna of the college, I think it's really important for students to be willing to work with who they're working with. So working with me, if they're going to be applying for the college, the communication part is really important. And then finding out, being aware of what challenges, like everybody said, being aware of the challenges that they've had in the past and what they think will help in the future and what Landmark can help them find their path. I think that's all that's really important.
Okay. Diane, are there any questions that have come up? You're muted. No questions?
No questions yet.
Okay, so I have one. Having worked in this field for a long time, what advice do you give to the student who says, well, I'm going to college and I don't think I'm going to need accommodations? What do you say to that student?
Oh, I'll start that one. That is absolutely fine. That's a choice. What we want to do is let you know that we are here as a resource for you. I have students whom register with our office as seniors, and they've been here their entire collegiate career, always knew we existed, but for whatever reason, they just felt that they didn't want to be deemed a student with a disability or whatever that may look like. And that's okay, that's a personal choice. You know, we understand that the strongest component when students engage our office is trust. If you trust and believe that the services that I have available to you will help your educational experience, then you will come back. But if you don't trust that what we have is going to be helpful for you, you won't engage our services. You may use your extended time for, you know, the end reason, and that's okay. But what we want to ensure that you trust the process, that what we're offering for you, you believe that it's going to help you, you know, be successful. So for us, if you don't want to make that decision right now, that's a-okay. However, we want to let you know that we exist, and when you're ready, because we want you to trust that what we're selling is real and it's going to be helpful for you, you engage fully. So if you're not ready, that's fine, but we'll be here when you are ready.
Anyone else add to that? Okay, any questions?
I was
go
gonna say
ahead.
it was well said, but also, of course, students are gonna be ashamed at first or don't want to reach out. For Landmark, some students do come with that attitude, and then they realize the community building changes their whole perspective, and having residence deans or residence assistants or another student telling them, oh, you should reach out to our writing center, it helps tremendously. You should reach out to your advisor more often. It makes a huge difference, and I think students, it's just maturing. It's really, they'll do it when they need to.
Okay. Daniel or Sarah, would you add anything?
You know, both of you said it very well, and just to kind of piggyback and echo, with our program, we do hear that, you know, I'm not quite sure we want to utilize the SALT Center this first year, but that's okay. Like Michael said, we've had students come back to us as juniors and seniors. Conversely, we've had students enter our program as freshmen, have got up to a really, really great start, leave our program because they felt independent and wonderful, but then they return because, you know what, they just love having that safety net. So, you know, they're all family, no matter when they decide to join officially. So we're all good.
And one of the things that we remind them is that we want to meet them where they're at. So, you know, sometimes they're in our program and really on the high recommendation and expectation of their parents. And so sometimes it's like, yes, I'm going to do all these things, and then school starts and things don't happen that way. But we always remind them that we're there to meet them where they're at. So they don't have to be fully ready. They might not be ready until second semester or, you know, junior year. But regardless of when they get there, we'll still be there.
Okay.
Okay, Gretchen, there's a couple of questions.
Yeah, thank you. So one of the questions is, do any of the colleges offer any communication with the parents or family in case of a crisis? Each of you could speak to that. Thank you.
I'll take a stab at that. I would want to, first of all, thank you for whomever, to the parent offering the question. I would want to define what crisis means first. That could be a myriad things. And so I would want to understand what crisis meant. But I'll take it from a very broad perspective, that what I'm hearing within the question, that if there was an issue that the student was having, would we reach out to the parents? And that is multi-layered. If it was an academic issue, and we have parents now who call and say, hey, Mike, how's my son or daughter doing in X class? And due to FERPA rules, we can't divulge that information. We can't do that. What I offer parents is to reach out to their son or daughter and ask them, because I can access their grades, but the student definitely knows how they're doing. And so I would, ask the parent to engage the student in that way. If it was a physical crisis, something to their body or person, there's already university protocols that dictate contacting parents if the student, was hospitalized or something along those lines. There's already university protocols for that. But if it's something relative to the academics, then we don't share those things with parents or guardians without consent from the student, because again, what we're trying to establish is trust. And we want students to feel that when they're engaging with our team, our staff, that relationship is building and that trust is forming. And so we want to make sure that as we talk to those students, that trust is ever present. And we don't want students to feel that you're going to tell my mom, you're going to tell my grandparent about that. But I hope that's what the parent was getting to.
Okay. All right. Daniel, Sarah, would you say anything about that? Ed or Erica?
Yeah, so with the FERPA rule, also, I don't know if this is every school, but at Landmark, students get to choose if their parents are allowed to get information, get emails about their updates, and if there's any issues. I don't know the FERPA rule too well. I don't know if that is the FERPA rule, but or if that is what they signed for that, but that's what we do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we have to make it abundantly clear during our orientations and during recruitment that if you would like your parents to have information regarding your academic progress or anything like that, students have to sign off on a consent form per the FERPA guidelines. Not every student elects to do that, and that's their choice. We don't force it down their throat. We're kind of neutral. We deal with a population of students oftentimes that, their parents, hey, their perspective is I'm paying the bill, I get to know what's going on. And those are some rough conversations sometimes. But like Michael alluded to, students stay engaged because of that relationship they develop with their support specialist, and that comes from a foundation of trust. So if they know they can come to our building, have a meaningful, personal, heartfelt conversation with their specialist, and it's because of their personal path and their growth, and it won't be shared, that means a lot, that carries a lot. So FERPA is the absolute driver of the whole bus, and students have that choice whether or not to sign or not sign.
Okay, and just for clarification, because some people might not know what FERPA is, right? We live in this world.
FERPA stands for the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act.
Correct.
And Diane, are there any more questions?
There's one more. No, there are two more now. There's another one that just popped in.
Okay. You want to read it?
Do the schools offer help with navigating student life?
Who would want to take that? I know, Michael, you spoke about that, but go ahead.
With our office, as I shared before, as we're engaging the student, helping them understand all the different services and resources available on campus. I definitely, as I engage our students, share with them about our student activities and leadership development office. And what I'm so proud of, is that they have a wealth of student groups and student clubs that allow them an opportunity to find their niche on campus. And so a lot of that, is shared with my office. Also, the academic advisors. Every student on campus has an academic advisor, and he or she is also, we're sharing the same narrative of getting involved and finding your niche on campus. And so we do that within our intakes because we want students to have the full collegiate experience. But in addition to my team, there's other individuals on campus that are also sharing that student engagement piece, so students can feel a part of the campus and feel part of the university. So we do that in a very direct fashion, but also other faculty and staff on campus are doing that as well.
Thank you. Sarah, you were going to say something.
Yeah, although we provide academic support, we know that students can't really get to the academics unless they're kind of taken care of, socially, mentally. So whatever they want to talk about with their support specialist is really, everything's on the table. We tell them that there's literally nothing that we haven't heard before. So talk with us and let us know what it is that is on your mind. We help students to get connected with resources on campus, or maybe short programs in our own center, but we do address all of that because college is definitely a holistic experience.
Okay. Erica, would you add anything?
Add to that, getting involved is really important for students' mental health and academics. As an alumni, I actually just graduated with my bachelor's degree from Landmark this last semester. And for an example of how Landmark builds more community, even outside doing online classes during our pandemic, it was really obviously hard for a lot of students to get out of bed and do their work. And some examples is that we had virtual Zumba, and for me, I had virtual women's workout, and that made such a difference. And students had club meetings virtually, and we just know how important it is to get our students out of even in their rooms for now. We put on a lot of residential life programming and try to get to know all of our residents to build our whole community. We're only a school of 450 students, and so that makes all the difference.
Mm-hmm. Lovely. Thank you. I just want to say thank you to everyone who's participated in this. We really appreciate this very, very much. Megan, would you be able to share so that I can put up the contact information, the contact slide? Is that possible to do?
Yep, you can share from your screen, so you'll have access to that.
I do.
It's gonna be a green button at the bottom of your screen.
Yep. So I'm just going to share this real quick. There it is. And everyone's contact information is here. And just one last thing, that on October 20th, if you want to go to the the post-secondary choices organization website, there is going to be it's a wonderful resource for you because it has a lot of college information, more about students who are seeking accommodations, factors they need to consider. But also on this, and just so you know, this is going to be recorded, and you have access to Daniel, Sarah, Michael, Erica, myself, or Diane at New Trier. But thank you so much for joining us. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, everyone. And to the panelists, thank you so much. Have a great afternoon, wherever time zone you are, evening potentially. And we will see you in another session potentially. So have a great evening, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.